Welcome back to the 43rd episode of the Boy Oh Boy Away podcast. Today we have a massive guest who won two premierships at North Melbourne, an AFL Players Association MVP, played 237, kicked 237 goals. Played 237 games and kicked 310 goals. Please welcome Corey Mckernan. Thanks for coming on today, mate.
How you going, mate?
Yeah, good. Thanks, self.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
How'd you first get involved in footy?
I first, got involved in football. Yes, way back when. I think it was only because a few of my cousins and that played at a club called West Meadows in Melbourne,
Yep.
which happens to be the same football club as Dane Swan. And I think I was only about 5 years old, and I think at that time when I had to sign the contract for West Meadows, I was still young enough that I was still young. I think I was still too young to actually officially sign on my name and everything like that.
Yep.
I just ended up going down to West Meadows at that point when I was younger, and that was the start of going down to West Meadows. Like I think I was at West Meadows playing there um, from when I was five until I was about 12, maybe 12 or 13 years old, and then I stopped playing football. Then I started playing golf, and then it was only when I was playing at school, like during the same, I really give up footy altogether. I gave up playing club football from when I was about 12 or 13 years old.
Yep.
And then it was only because we were playing school football, which meant I could usually get time out of school, which was a good thing. And from when I was about 12 or 13 up until I was about 17, I just pretty much played golf all the time. And it was only because North Melbourne schools, and they asked me to go down to North Melbourne, and which I wasn't really that keen on initially. And
Yep.
um, so that's how I sort of ended up sort of going from junior footy through to North Melbourne.
Yep. What was the path of the AFL like for you personally?
The path.
Yeah, like getting to North Melbourne.
Well, that's what I mean. Mine was a little bit unique because number one, I wasn't really keen on playing football at all.
Yep.
And as I mentioned before, it was only because we played school footy. Anyway, cut a long story short, it was only that Dennis Pagan used to drive out to my house and wanted me to come down and play football at North Melbourne in the under-19s, and I wasn't
Yep.
really that keen on doing that. And I think it was only after it was about round 6 or 7 of that year, and then Dennis said to me, he goes, "Look, you don't have to come and train on the Tuesday. I think I only went and trained on Thursday night." He said, "Just come and train Thursday night, come and play Saturday, and then see how you go." I kicked 5 goals in the first quarter and then kicked another six for the game. So I kicked 11 goals. And that was it. That sort of meant that I was probably staying at North Melbourne. But even then, like, I wasn't, those first couple of years at North Melbourne, I wasn't really that keen on playing football at all. But it was only when I'd had a couple of games in the reserves, I think it was, that I went, well, hang on, I'm actually all right at it. And at that point, I wouldn't say I was or I was that committed to playing football.
Yep.
So it probably took a few games of being in the system and being in and around North Melbourne to suddenly realise that I might be half a chance to play.
Yeah. What was your sort of first year at North Melbourne like for you?
Well, the first official year on the senior list, it was a bit of a nothing sort of year. I think I'd finished school, so I think working at Dad's work, where I was sort of unloading trucks and worked at a transport company, and so I was not really committed to any one thing. I wouldn't say I was committed to work. I wouldn't say I was over the moon about playing footy about at that point. And like I said, it was only in maybe in the back half of that year that I suddenly realised that, yeah, I thought, well, hang on, if I actually train properly and have a real crack at this, I might be okay. So it was really going into the next year um, that, yeah, I think I ended up training with Mark Roberts, and I mean, I trained really hard, but then the unfortunate thing going into that season where I'd done a huge pre-season, I rushed my appendix in the pre-season.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, I've since learnt since that incident that if you have a ruptured appendix, you can actually die from it. And my weight went from at that point, like when I first got to North Melbourne, I think I was 87 kilos, and in one pre-season, I think I put on 10 kilos. Sorry, and I put on 10 kilos, and once I had the ruptured appendix, I lost it all. You know what I mean? So it was pretty difficult in terms of sort of dealing with that. But all I had to do was sort of get back on the horse and recommit to training and try and get back into the team. So I think that particular year was the same year where North Melbourne were on the up, and that same year where I ruptured my appendix, but then played that entire year. I think I ended up being emergency something like 11 or 12 times for the seniors.
Yeah.
But I made my mind up going into, what was it, 1994, that I just made up my mind where I said I'll become that good that they have to play me. That was my mentality, that I didn't want to be told I was going to be emergency due to excuses. I just made up my mind to go, you know what, I'm going to become that good that you have to play me. It's not my problem if you have to put someone else out. And that was the right mentality to have. It's the right mentality I'd tell anyone. Don't rely on other people to control your destiny. I went and controlled my own destiny, made yourself good,
Yeah.
and at least that way, it was their problem, not my problem. You know what I mean?
Yep. Um, what was the lead up to your debut like, and what was that like playing your first game for North Melbourne?
Um, well, look, as I mentioned, yeah, that year where I come off the ruptured appendix, I think I was emergency. Yeah, I was emergency a number of times, so I was getting closer and closer. Yeah, I think it's like anyone that plays their first game. It's a bit of a blur. Like mine was against St Kilda. It was on a Friday night at the MCG. I didn't really do a lot. I think it's probably like everyone that plays your first game. You got no idea in terms of the pace and bright lights. All of a sudden, I mean, you're in the reserves where it's a little bit slower. But then going up to senior footy, and I don't know, everything's bigger, faster, quicker. So yeah, I mean, didn't really do a lot in my first. I think I played one game that particular year, and then went back. As I said, I was on the emergency trail, well and truly. But yeah, just I think anyone that when you go into your first game like that, it's such a blur that lead up to the game, well wishes and people wanting to wish you luck and everything like that. But all you want to do, to be honest, all you want to do is get the game out the way, and then you can
Yep.
start your actual footy career.
Yeah. What was it like to have a pretty strong, pretty strong second season at North?
Um, well, yeah, as I mentioned, that really came off the back of, I would say, like I said, I mean, using the disappointment in a good way of that was born out of being emergency, I would say 11 or 12 times in that year. And then I made sure, like going into that off season, that I was going to make sure that all my training and made sure I had an unbelievably big uninterrupted pre-season. And yeah, I mean, once I got in the first game of the year, I think again, unbelievable. I think it was against St Kilda, the first game of the year where I kicked a few goals, and then that particular year, I think I played 23 or 24 games that year. So once I got in, I ended up playing the entire year. Like I was pretty fortunate. Once I did get in the seniors, I think not like that sort of 94, 95, 96 type period. I mean, I would have averaged 23 to 25 games a year. So I was pretty lucky in terms of my body that I was able to play lots of games of footy.
Yeah, what was it like to be one of the best players in 1996, if not the best?
Um, it's it's something that you don't really, I suppose, think about that much. It was probably just more. I was incredibly lucky that you're able to play alongside against with a guy like Wayne Carey, and because you got Wayne in your side, you don't ever. It's never ever entering your mind that what you're doing is on the same level as what Wayne Carey's doing. But I suppose the great feeling was like I do distinctly remember through that period, or even that period during the 90s, but in particular that year, I remember there were certain games where Wayne and I walked to the forward line and knowing that no one would be able to stop us. Like if the pair of us were down there and both of us were playing well, I know there was one particular game where we played Melbourne at the MCG, and I think between us we kicked something like 16 goals and took something like 32 marks for the game. Like he took 18, I took 14. Now, if you got your two power forwards that they're going to mark the ball that many times, you're not going to lose too many games of footy. But
Yeah,
I suppose, look, coming back to your question, look, I think to around that period, I think I was incredibly lucky that you had someone like Wayne that I learnt a lot off in the way that you prepare and go about your footy. Did I ever think that I was in the same level? Not him. I probably never ever thought I was in the same level as Wayne Carey, even though I mean that particular year I might have been on par or above him. But it's probably the great feeling when you're playing footy like that and you're dominating. It's a great feeling being on the ground and knowing when you're playing at your best that no one can stop you. That's a better feeling. Like to know that you know that when you play your absolute best, that no one can stop you. And I know that there was a lot of games that when I got in that frame of mind that no one was able to stop me.
yeah. How hard was it to sort of lose the Brownlow due to being suspended?
Well, it wasn't. It was actually I would rate it as the best week of my life from the point of view that a lot of you people out there would probably see nowadays when they talk about ruckman being only like 21 or 22 years old, and everyone says to them, "Oh, they're only young and they're still developing." Well, I think I was 22, and Matty Capuano was 21, and we were both playing in the ruck at North Melbourne during that time. But that week, I wouldn't trade for nothing in my life. It was one of the greatest weeks of my life from the point of view as a 22-year-old, the way I was able to handle it. That I had the Brownlow medal happen on the Monday. I was also dealing with the fact that I had a posterior cruciate that if it was a normal home and away game, I probably wouldn't have played the following week.
Yeah,
On the Wednesday, about 60 or 70 mils of blood drained down on my knee. Um, and then, look, in between that, the way I was able to handle the whole week and put all that to the side because I was so single minded in winning a premiership, and to then also come out in the grand final, I had 31 possessions playing in the ruck in the grand final. I wouldn't trade that week for anything. Like, I mean, I know the Brownlow's a great award, but to be 22 years old and have effectively the whole world thrown at me and still able to come out and perform on the biggest stage in front of 100,000 people, I wouldn't trade that for anything. Like, it'd be great to win the Brownlow, but I won the AFL MVP and I won a centenary premiership medallion. But by the way, I did technically get a Brownlow because Wayne Carey and Anthony Rock, they stopped at McDonald's, and McDonald's had a promotion that year that you could get the medals from McDonald's, and Wayne Carey and Anthony Rock did get me a McDonald's Brownlow medal, which I've actually still got at home, and it sits with them. And to be honest, it sits with my premiership at home, and it means as much to me than the actual Brownlow because it came from my mates and the guys that I played football with. To get something off them probably means as much as getting it off the umpires, to tell
yeah,
you the truth, because they're all close mates at North Melbourne. So,
yeah. What was this? You sort of touched on it there. What was your lead up to the grand final like?
One thing that Dennis Pagan was and is always great at that about your preparation, and that was always drummed into us. If I had to say what was the single biggest legacy that Dennis would leave on us all, and still to this day, with the habits that Dennis has taught me, is about preparation, and especially going into those big games. If you prepare week in, week out, where you do the same things, you do all the extras, you go for your extra swim, you walk in the water, you massage, all those sorts of things. Going into the games, knowing that you prepared and done all the right things, it's almost as if on game day, because you've done everything right, all that's left is to go enjoy it. And that was the way that, and aside from that, being grand final week, do everything exactly what you usually do. And I know I live with Matthew Capuano and Stuart Anderson, and on the Thursday night, and again, this sticks in the mantra of actually doing all the things you usually do. Now, we were three 21, 22-year-olds living in the same house, so you can imagine what our house was like. And what we did on the Thursday night, we did what all 21, 22-year-old guys would do, where we were always pretty social. So we went to the Royal Melbourne show on the Thursday night before the AFL Grand Final. And I still remember going on the Gravitron where we were upside down, that ride where you get spun around. And I think a few people were a bit shocked that we're on there. And someone asked me, they go, "What are you doing here? You should be at home." And you go, "No, this is what we always do." Like, you do exactly what you usually do during a normal week of game of footy. And that's what I always tell a lot of clubs that you end up talking to. I think everyone wants a mythical tip about what you're going to do during grand final week that's going to get you across the line. What's going to get you across the line is the boringness of just doing the attention to detail things and doing what you usually do. That's what gets you across the line. All the little things. Maybe grand final day, all that's going to show up for the teams that are there, I think you could trace it back. Usually, the team that ends up winning it, you find that if you can do all those little things, and it's not just grand final week, but across the entirety of the year, well, then you don't have any regrets. It's only when you don't do all those little things, then you go, shit, could I have done more goal kicking, or could I have gone and recovered better? If you can go into those big games, and fortunately, we had that feeling that you had prepared and done all the right things, you're going to have no regrets.
Yeah, how different was the second grand final to your first one?
Well, 98 was a little bit different from memory. I think we were really red hot favourites in the 1998 grand final. It's one of those ones that, to be honest, I haven't given it a great deal of thought. Though that said, I think look, it was only recently when I saw the way that Kobe Bryant, and when he spoke about how you handle failure, and when I saw Kobe, he was mentoring a girl in college, and she had like a really bad game, and what he did, he made her sit down and go through and watch the entirety of this game. And I thought, you know what, we should have sat down and watched it. It would have been horrible to watch,
Yeah.
but treat it not as an opportunity that, I don't know, we're going to sit down, we're going to get told off. And we're all guilty of that. We're all guilty where we think, oh, we don't want to hear the horrible truths and whatever. But I think and it's interesting because it was so long ago, but when you think about it, with teams that usually have a bad loss in big finals like that, you've got to go through and sit down and watch it. And what are you going to learn out of it? And we probably, I don't know, we never sat down. Amazingly, we were lucky enough to go on and win the grand final the year after. I think I don't know what learnings we managed to get out of it, other than we knew we didn't kick straight. We kicked 2 goals 11 in the second quarter.
Yeah.
But I think, going into the following year, I think we just had this hunger and this burn in us that we had to make up for it. But when you think about it, it was a real missed opportunity. Like, we could have sat down and said, right, what could we have done better? This is real ugly. It's real raw. We're going to sit down, and it's not going to be a finger pointing thing. It's going, okay, what can you actually learn so that if we get in those situations again, it's not going to happen again.
Yeah, off that, how good was it to be back there the next year and to win it?
Well, I think it was in the end, it was just a sense of relief. It's all of them are different feelings. Like the 1996 one was because it's your first one. I think has that sheer elation and it's the unknown of when the siren goes, and you don't know how to react, and it's been a build up, and you've always dreamt of that moment because we won in '96 and lost it in a bad way in '98. Yeah, I was still elated, but it was also an elation mixed with you were just relieved. Like you were relieved that you'd made up and made amends for what had happened the year before. You can never make amends for it. Because anytime you'd run into an Adelaide Crows person, and when they say they've won two flags, and you like to remind them that they maybe won one and we gifted them one, but look, full credit to them. They took all their chances and we didn't. And
Yep.
it's interesting when I talk to people about like and if you get the chance and look down at any grand final day and see how things go, it comes down to those little things that every player gets their chance. And one thing, a huge part of that is goal kicking on grand final day. I mean, if you might have five scoring shots in the first quarter, but if you kick 5 points and instead of 3 goals, two or 4 goals, one, it's just such a different psyche the way it happens. And unfortunately, we didn't take our chances.
Yeah, what led to the move to Carlton?
Look, mine was just a pure. I wasn't getting the best out of myself at North Melbourne under Dennis Pagan. I wasn't enjoying my footy, and it had been like that for a number of years.
Yeah.
So I just thought, look, it was best for everyone. I don't, and Dennis, even now, like we've got as good a relationship, I think, as we'd ever had. But it was more just me sensing that I wanted to do something about my football. It's a bit like someone having a boss at work. You don't get the best out of yourself, so you decide to move. I was probably just incredibly stiff that then Dennis decided to come to Carlton, and next minute he was my coach at Carlton the year after I won the best and fairest. So
Yeah, what was it like coming back to North, and was that a hard decision or pretty easy?
look, it was pretty easy, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. The year that Dennis came back to, sorry, when he came over to Carlton after I won the best and fairest, that following year took so much out of me I think from a mental point of view that I should have, to be honest, I should have actually retired then and there. Like it had, remember, these are in times, what are we? It's next year, it's actually nearly 20 years ago, but I don't know, maybe we're better we're better armed, and I'm better armed with all the things I know now about, things like meditation and different things that you can do to help you from a mental point of view. But I tell you, like the year that when Dennis came across there, and then me then playing the two following years, like to be honest, they were junk. Like they were no good, and it wasn't. Yeah, it was interesting. Even though I was fortunate enough, I got to go back to North where it all started. But to be honest, it was yeah, probably not. It wasn't a good experience the last 2 years.
Yeah, what led to you retiring?
No, I just got to the point. I think from a physical point of view, I was fine, but it was just mentally. I think so many different things had taken a toll,
Yeah.
and not that I was suffering from a mental health point of view or anything like that, but it was more the drain and I'd left North Melbourne, which was such a big move, and then go across to Carlton, get re-established, and then Dennis came over. In the end, those things probably took a toll on me, and it was a shame because I think from a physical point of view, I was still pretty good, but it was just mentally, I'd more than had enough.
Yeah, can you tell us little bit about Walk With Me Online and all how that all sort of come about?
Yeah, well, I created Walk With Me online. Unfortunately, when I saw the headline in the Australian newspaper last year that the suicide toll was going to outstrip the coronavirus toll. And then I thought, what can I actually do? Like we all either sit on the sidelines and talk about different things, but then the idea that I came up with, it was probably born about, I mean, we're obviously doing Zoom now. And then I thought, well, hang on, if we can do a Zoom walk where we can walk and talk, you know what I mean? At least, I mean, they can hear ideas from different guests and different people, ideas of what they do in order to thrive through adversity. And that's where the whole thing started. Like we just, I mean, like I said, exactly what we're doing now. But you're out there walking, got your headphones on, and and it was just a really good thing to do that we're still doing now. We're in the end, we're just become more of people getting to the next phase of suffering from physical or mental fitness issues. That's what I want to do. Like if that's the ultimate dream for what you're trying to achieve with Walk With Me, well, that's it. I want to be more about prevention rather than you've gone too far the other way and then you're really struggling.
Yeah, last question. Who are the best players that you've played with and against?
Well, the ones I played with, you can throw a blanket over a number of them. I look. There's obviously the on-field performance, which everyone probably thinks Wayne Carey, but then I'm very lucky that period that we all managed, I think, to bring the best out of one another with the way that we all prepared for games of footy, and you're very, very, very lucky to get thrown into an environment like that where you got like-minded people and got the best out of one another. That's the greatest thing. But to narrow it down, look, obviously Wayne Carey. Look, the biggest. I always say it about Wayne, and he's heard me talk about him, that the most underrated thing about Wayne is how he prepared for games of footy and how he trained. People don't get how hard he trained. He never drank alcohol during the week. He'd have a beer after the game on the weekends, but it was the way that he trained in his pre-season and then even during season, the things that I then took on board of whether it was before training, we go for an extra swim or we go for a walk in the water down at St Kilda Beach. We were the first team to start doing that. Things like massage, maybe on certain weeks we might do extra goal kicking. So if you want to be extraordinary, well, guess what? You got to. That's probably the moral of the story. You got to do extra things, and that's not only whether you play football, whether you're in business, whether you're at school. That'll be my advice to anyone. If you want to be extra special, guess what? You got to do extra things.
Yep. That's everything I got for you, mate.
And then, sorry, the other one and I always talk about him, and I played against him and then got to play with him. I think the footy that Anthony was playing before he'd hurt his knee, that was the best football from an opposition player I'd ever seen. And there might be some people more consistent, but that patch of football that Kuda played, I think it reminded me of someone playing like a Wayne Carey, and that's the type of football I love. That sort of player that they just play with such a dominance and a bit of arrogance. Well, it's a confidence and an arrogance that when the game gets to that point of the game, they know that they can just put their foot down and just take it away from the opposition. And that's what Kuda did really well during that patch and what Wayne did for his whole career.
Yeah, definitely. That's everything I got, mate. Thanks heaps once again for coming on.
No, a pleasure, mate. Thanks. We finally got to do it.